There's a coarseness, a toxicity in politics now that was barely palpable 20 years ago. Those were the words of outgoing Fine Gael TD Ciarán Cannon when he announced his retirement from politics. A toxicity in politics. Since then, others have come out to echo his words, with Finance Minister Michael McGrath saying, "I think it's fair to say discourse around politics has changed, particularly online, where there is now a coarseness and a level of abuse that I didn't see when I first entered national politics 17 years ago. So is politics more toxic than it once was? Well, it's interesting to me that in both of those quotes, both Cannon and McGrath mention how things have changed in roughly 20 years. I wonder why that is. Obviously, reason number one would be the rise of the internet and social media. Politicians are now far more accessible to the electorate, provided they don't turn off comments, that is. And while there's plenty to say on the effects of this accessibility and social media in general, which I'll get to shortly, there is a second reason that things have changed. 20 years ago, the Celtic Tiger was in its pomp. And for the first time in the history of the state, Ireland was actually doing pretty well for itself. Then came the crash that absolutely ruined so many lives and has had a knock-on effect for future generations which has not been addressed. And therein lies the problem. 20 years ago, things were going well, and so politicians got a free pass. Too free of a pass, as we can all see now. But now, well, now people are struggling. The social contract has not only been broken but ripped up and destroyed in front of our eyes. Hard work doesn't guarantee anything anymore. House prices are above the crazy Celtic Tiger bubble prices, while wages have stagnated. The most basic of needs has been commodified, sold off to investors and vulture funds, and placed firmly out of reach of ordinary people. And people have taken note of those who are responsible for this mess. So is it any wonder attitudes towards politicians have changed so drastically? In the wake of the crash, our country has been brought to the brink of ruin. I feel like a broken record at this stage, but let's do another quick checklist of the issues facing ordinary people today. Record house prices, record homelessness, record child homelessness, insane rents, record levels of hidden homeless and adults living at home, ridiculous fuel and electricity costs, the cost of living crisis continuing unabated with stagnating wages not going nearly as far as they used to, trolley crisis after trolley crisis, ever-growing waiting lists for any and all health services, 100,000 children on a wait list for first-time intervention in primary care, a huge increase in the wait list for CAMS, hundreds of children in extreme pain with no relief waiting for urgent spinal surgeries, childcare places dwindling, staff shortages in teaching, healthcare, the Gardaí and the Defence Forces, and on and on and on it goes. And that's just the stuff that I can think of off the top of my head. All of this is happening while ministers and TDs fail to meet targets, fail to put the people first, force unpopular policies on the people, and become embroiled in scandal after scandal and failure after failure, all while earning a pretty penny. Is it any wonder politicians are facing such anger and backlash from the electorate? Now look, obviously there is a big difference between angry criticism or online arguing and real-world threatening behaviour and harassment. There are laws to deal with those people who cross the line in person, and those lines are very clear. But it's the online abuse that I want to focus on here, as TDs often highlight that type of abuse. And this is where social media comes back to the fore. We have never before been so interconnected in our world. We can see scandals break in real time. We can share information far easier, and we are not reliant on traditional news media for that information. And so it is far easier to get the full picture and see the full extent of the failures laid bare. With the world at our fingertips, it's also easier than ever to voice an opinion. And more to the point, it's easier than ever to voice those opinions directly to the relevant parties. So what happens when people are both angry and online? Well, things can get heated. People often say things online that they would never dream of saying offline. And as a millennial who grew up while the internet was also growing up, this really is just a part of the internet. Trolls be trolling, and keyboard warriors be keyboard warrioring. That's just the internet, folks. Nile Collins, or Nile Collins has called for social media companies and platforms to do a better job of trying to control and moderate the abuse of politicians. So what constitutes abuse online? Is it criticism or calling for a resignation? Because from what I've seen, TDs are far more inclined to turn off comments than open themselves up to any sort of reaction or criticism, and Nile Collins is a prime example. After the various articles by The Ditch broke covering his planning misadventures, which I've covered in previous videos, Nile Collins turned off comments, on his tweets at least, after the hashtag Nile Collins started trending. People were furious at the emerging scandal and how he brazened it all out. And to avoid what he and other politicians would surely class as abuse, despite that anger being warranted, he just turned off the comments. We've seen that recently with the referendums too, a great many TDs turning off or restricting comments to avoid hearing from the public. And guess what? That just adds to the anger and frustration felt by the public. Public representatives are just ignoring the public they are supposed to represent. And this is something that really bothers me. I understand wanting to avoid actual abuse or threats, but firstly, you can report genuinely abusive and threatening posts and replies, and block if necessary, but when it's just angry criticism and reactions, well, you know what? You chose to get into politics where your decisions have a massive impact on people's lives, and those people may get angry when those policies and decisions negatively affect them, especially if they are deemed to be unfair, and doubly so when it appears that a politician is getting away with something that regular people wouldn't. And while undoubtedly nasty stuff gets said online, from what I see, the vast majority of comments are people just venting frustrations and expressing their criticisms of politicians and their policies. Michael McGrath said, "It's personal, it's abusive, and doesn't focus on the issues at hand." And while, yeah, the odd time you see that, I would have to disagree in the main, because the vast majority of what I see is very much focused on the issues and the failures of the ministers and TDs who are becoming more and more removed from the reality the rest of us live in every day. If you can't stand by your politics, then you shouldn't be a politician. No one is debating that threats and harassment have no place in civil society, but you have to be able to stand up to criticism. When you run away from the electorate by turning off comments, or by tarring every critical opinion as a bot just because they wish to remain anonymous online, all you are doing is losing touch with the people you are supposed to represent and placing yourself in an echo chamber of what you want to hear, which will ultimately just lead to even more anger from the electorate. So do we have a toxicity problem in politics? Well, I would say yes, we do, but not in the way politicians would have you believe. We have toxic politicians who believe they are above the people they're supposed to represent. How many members of the current cabinet, never mind the rest of the government, have forgotten to declare a property or two, or overclaimed on expenses, or forgot about or misrepresented donations or election expenses? We have toxicity in the form of shutting down debate, not just by turning off comments, but with the proposed hate speech bill, and with the way dissenting opinions are tarred and dismissed. We have a toxicity in politics in the form of clinging on to power at all costs, by voting Simon Harris's Taoiseach, despite the lack of faith in him that brought down the previous government, by the very people who will all fall in line and vote for him now. All of that and more is far more toxic than some hearty words on social media. So what do you think? Do you agree with the politicians on this? Do you think social media should be more moderated? Or do you think they need to grow a thicker skin and get on with it? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to be notified of new content. If you want to support the channel, you can buy me a coffee or a super thanks, which is greatly appreciated, and a huge thank you to those of you that already have. You can also follow me on Twitter. Until next time, slán go fóill.